If you have been wondering about Financial Peace University, maybe wondering, are there alternatives to it? What is it really like? Is it right for you? I want to tell you a little bit about my experience of going through FPU way back in 2012. So if you're new here, I'm Teri Slater. I'm a personal finance coach, and I help couples get on the same page and get out of debt so that they can start working together towards financial freedom. So first I want to talk to you a little bit about how Financial Peace University works. And again, I took it back in 2012, and so I know there have been some changes to the program, but I just want to tell you what it was like when I did go through it. So a few sort of like logistical things about it is that it is hosted by essentially like volunteer facilitators, and it's often hosted in a church. And so I know that might be something that sort of gets in the way for people. Maybe you don't really feel comfortable going to church. I can say safely that I did not feel super comfortable going to a church because I'm a non-religious person. So, but that is generally where it's facilitated. You can sometimes find that there are other places that are outside of a religious organization that are also hosting it, maybe just like locally in your community. So that's generally where it's hosted. Back when I took it, it was a 12-week program, and I believe that now it's consolidated down to 9. But what would happen is that with each week you would watch like a pre-recorded video lesson. So it was generally Dave on a stage, and he would teach basic personal finance lessons. And I do have to say, and I actually got out like this old, I think it's an old book, maybe they're still using this, but they have like a workbook that they would use. And so during, each week it would cover a different topic. So, saving was one week, getting out of debt was another week, like credit reports and scores was another week. And then he would also talk about like insurance, buying a car. I know Dave's really big on like talking about buying cars for cash and things like that too. So anyway, every single week there would be sort of a pre-recorded video lesson, and in the workbook it's kind of like a fill in the blank, like you listen and take notes as you go through it. So that would be like the bulk of the class time, and then at the end of every class, if you will, they had kind of like an open like discussion where I know that when we did it, we would break out into groups, and they would have facilitators and like, conversation prompts to relate to the topic of either what you learned last week or what you were going to be tackling in that particular week. And so it was then open for group discussion. Of course, the whole thing was also geared towards like sort of learning and teaching you the baby steps. And so a couple of things that I just want to mention, like right out of the gate. So I am a financial coach. However, I am not a Dave Ramsey certified financial coach. I was actually already working in a nonprofit as a financial counselor before I actually went through the course. I'm actually going to link to a video up here in the top two about a Bigger Pockets Money podcast episode that I did. It's also a video show that you can watch here on YouTube, where I go into quite a bit of detail about like my personal situation and also my experience in Financial Peace University too. So as I was saying, I was actually working as a financial counselor before I even went through the course. And the reason that I like to point that out is because even though I already had like the training and the skills, and I have a finance degree, I had all the background knowledge, it's more than just math. There's like a whole lot of like behavioral stuff. And so I really needed to have some sort of a, I guess what I would call it like a structured plan and an environment in order to, move towards the right progress, financially speaking, and how it impacted my relationship. So I'm no longer married, but at the time, my ex-husband and I went through it together, and we didn't necessarily see completely like eye to eye on things. We worked well together on reaching our financial goals, but we had some different values around money. And since I was already working as a financial counselor, I kind of needed somebody else to deliver the messages to him, right? Because sometimes when we're having our own conversations, we can bring a lot of our own stuff and our own background and our own, thoughts and feelings about, money and things like that to the table. And so it really kind of helped me to level the playing field between the two of us, so we could sort of get on the same page, and move forward getting out of debt. We did pay off over $200,000 in debt. It was a long, slow haul, but we did it. And so I really do credit Financial Peace University for at least giving us just sort of some basic framework steps of step one, get the emergency fund. Step two, pay off debts, largest to smallest, blah, 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 etc. So if you need more information on the baby steps, you can Google that too. But I want to talk just a little bit about the pros and cons of this particular program too, because I think that's also really important to understand a few things about whether or not you think something like this is the right fit for you or not. So the first pro that I would mention is that I do feel like it was motivating. It really kind of got you into a place, a mindset where you were really feeling motivated to do something different with your money. And Dave has a very no nonsense, sort of slap you in the face sort of style about, making you change your behaviors and stop doing, dumb things with your money. So while I would say that that was a motivational pro, he's a pretty decent motivational speaker. I'm also going to say that one of the cons is that I don't really listen to his stuff anymore. I used to listen to his radio show and, was kind of all in while I was going through this process. I've met him, have volunteered at some of his events, attended his events, etc. But I have found that, so one of the things, I think there's assumptions about people in relationships, that, every couple that's married, they're always on the same page and they're always working together. And I think that if you've got some struggle in your relationship and how that plays out with money, I think that he can be pretty condescending about that, and isn't necessarily so nice to you as a couple, basically calls somebody a whiner if they can't, get on the same page, or, if you're, doling out money like an allowance to your spouse, then, he'll say negative things about that. I know that in our situation, I was always the one that kind of did the money. My husband at the time was just kind of just tell me what to do and I'll do it. But he really didn't want to look at it with me, and sort of plan with me. So there was there were big differences in how we wanted to move forward. So I think that, sometimes the way that people go through financial peace is not necessarily the way that Dave expects everybody to just jump on the bandwagon together and work hard together and get through things. There's a lot about relationships that can be difficult. And so I found that to be fine while we went through it, but I don't listen to him anymore because I'm finding him more and more sort of demeaning to people too. One of the cons that I would say is that it was originally sort of touted as being lifetime access, right? It's a $99 program. You go through it, lifetime access to the program. And like I said, we went through it in 2012. I can remember going back to try to revisit some of the content and the material, because I was out of debt and kind of wanted to think more about next steps moving forward. And I want to say this was probably around 2018, so 6 years later. And I was actually not able to log into any of the platforms or anything like that. And so I actually reached out to the company and said, hey, lifetime access, I can't get into this new portal, because they had revamped their whole program. And they told me I would have to pay for the program again. They said you can always go through the live classes that are sponsored out in your community at no charge. But if you want access to our website and the worksheets and whatever else, you would have to actually pay for it again, because they had changed the program. I don't necessarily think that was super fair. So anyway, okay, so let's talk about another pro. Another pro, I would say, is the sense of community. So if you're somebody that likes to kind of like hear what's going on with other people, tell your story, hear other people's stories, sometimes you can get motivated by what other people are doing, then like the sense of community that you have in the discussion groups at the end of each lesson, I would call that a pro. I'm also going to call that a con for my own personal situation, because I know that in my situation, I felt a little bit embarrassed and ashamed, right? It's like I have a finance degree and I'm working as a financial counselor. Why am I even having financial problems? And so there's a little bit of like guilt, shame, and embarrassment around that. And so I didn't really feel like sharing, right? I didn't want to like sit down in a group and share stuff about, what was going on with us. Again, we weren't necessarily working together as a team the best way I thought that we could. So I had some feelings about that I also didn't want to kind of like surface in front of others, although now here I am talking about it. I didn't really want to share. So that sense of community, I think, can be both a pro and a con. Another pro is that I would say like it's really good for just having like steps and a framework. Like if you just need someone to like tell you what to do, step 1, save, $1,000 in the bank. Step 2, pay off your debts, smallest to largest. Step 3, save a bigger emergency fund. Step 4, etc. Having just like steps and a framework, that is definitely like one of the biggest successes that I think he has just sort of been coming up with that framework for the baby steps. So that's another pro. Another con that I'm going to say is that they are frequently like hosted in a church. And while I think that is, great, for so many people, and it's that sort of like sense of community, I think for some people, that can feel uncomfortable. If you're not the type of person who attends church regularly, it can feel a little bit strange, like going into a place of worship to go through these classes when you have no other like affiliation with a church, or that type of thing. So, he, Dave Ramsey himself, is of course a Christian, and I would say that he doesn't like sort of coat everything that he talks about with any sort of religious viewpoint, but it's obvious after listening to him for so long that that's kind of part of who he is, and that sort of shines through in some of the things that he talks about, but he doesn't lead with that, I would say. And so that to me like felt comfortable. Despite the fact that like going into a church every Sunday for these classes felt a little weird, I'm going to be honest. And so, yeah, I think that about covers it. Again, I think there can be some like assumptions that everybody is like really good about, tackling things and just being like no nonsense go-getters. And if it is difficult for you, if you are in a relationship where things are a little bit challenging, and maybe you don't want to talk about it, I do think that some of the other alternatives that you can look at is, there's tons of different books on personal finance, of course. I do have a free mini course. I'll also link to that in the description below the video too. And it really is just kind of like designed to help you kind of get some of the starting steps towards, setting goals for your money and then working towards a place of paying off debt. But I also like to focus pretty heavily on like the relationship aspect of it. So even if you're not in a physical relationship with somebody else, sometimes it's your own beliefs and thoughts around money too that can prohibit you from making progress the way that you might want to be making progress. So I try to focus on those kind of things in the coaching business that I have. So I will link to that below in the description as well. So hopefully that gives you a good idea of what financial peace was like, at least for me anyway. I know that, like I said, he's changed up the course a little bit. It's been a very long time, almost 10 years since I went through it anyhow. So things may have changed. So, feel free to look into it. But if you want to reach out to me and ask me any questions, you can always type that in the comments below too. I'm happy to respond to that. as always. So with that, if you liked this video, feel free to share it, or you can subscribe to my channel. And also I will link to the other video that features my interview on the Bigger Pockets Money podcast. So I hope you all have a fantastic day. Take care of yourself, and we'll talk to you later. Bye.